Yeah, I don't know how to explain.
Is Republican Congressman Darren LaHood. Congressman, good to see you again. Thanks for spending some time with me.
Good to be with you, Paul.
So shutdown averted for now. Could happen again. The next deadlines are January 19th and then February 2nd, based on the way the continuing resolution was passed. A few things in follow-up. There's no cuts in this plan, no spending cuts, which angered the MAGA Republicans. So Democrats have called this budget a win. Is there a winner, or does the fight just continue?
Well, I would just acknowledge that governing through continuing resolutions, through shutdowns, is not a way that we should govern. And that's why I voted against the bill. I don't want the government to shut down, but we can't continue to do things the way we've been doing them. We're almost $34 trillion in debt. This year alone, we're going to bring in $5 trillion to the Treasury. We're going to spend $7 trillion. So we're going to be $2 trillion over that. So we can't keep doing this. And so I'm glad we're not shutting down the government. This averts thing, as you said, till January or February. But we have to collectively, Republicans and Democrats, figure out a way forward that is not dysfunctional in the way we've been doing it.
Well, it's interesting because former Speaker McCarthy lost his job because he worked with Democrats, didn't have cuts in his plan. Under Speaker Johnson, it's the same thing, bipartisan effort to get it through. I guess the question is, does he also face a risk of a motion to vacate? And if not, was getting rid of McCarthy the right thing to do in the first place?
Well, I would argue it wasn't the right thing to do. I think the motion to vacate is a terrible mechanism. I think it subverts democracy when you can have 4% of Republicans partner with Democrats and bring down the speaker. So I thought that was wrong. That's why I voted against it. You can't have a gun at your head on everything you do. I will say this. I think Speaker Mike Johnson deserves the opportunity to lay out his agenda, his leadership. And that's why I think members gave him a bit of a pass. He has a honeymoon here. It'll be short-lived, believe me. But I think the other problem to recognize, Paul, is we have a math problem. We have 223 Republicans. We only have a 4-seat majority. We have a certain segment of our conference that has no interest in a governing coalition. And that's a problem. I'm not talking about a governing coalition with Democrats. I'm talking about with just in the Republican Party. And that is a problem and a difficulty. It also, I think, highlights the frustration with continued deficits, continued not abiding by budgets, and being $34 trillion in debt.
And then some related issues. The spending plan had no funding for Israel or Ukraine. You supported a standalone bill to help only Israel. It was blocked in the Senate because it also was defunding the IRS in the process. In the past, Israel funding was just, no strings attached. It just went through. Would you support a clean bill if it came back that way from the Senate?
Of course. I've supported that in the past. I think it was smart that Mike Johnson tried to find an offset for that, the $14.5 billion for Israel. That's a lot of taxpayer money. And I credit him for trying to take that from the IRS. That was a good thing to do. Moving forward, Paul, when we get back after the Thanksgiving break, we're going to have to figure out a way to help Israel, obviously to help Taiwan in the South China Sea, to fix our southern border. And there'll be a request for Ukraine funding also, which has been controversial. And there's been I think, a dissipation of support within the Republican Party. But I remain confident that those are 4 things that we need to tackle after the Thanksgiving break.
Do you support the Ukraine funding in the bill?
I have supported Ukraine funding in the past, Paul. I think we collectively understand that Putin can't win in Ukraine. He is a thug. He is a dictator. He is a butcher. He's an authoritarian. We can't allow him to win there. But what I'm not in favor of is a blank check from taxpayers when we can't even take care of our southern border that we're going to be sending, $60 billion to Ukraine. So I think we're going to have a discussion about that. What I want to see is transparency. I want to see the pathway to victory in Ukraine. I want to see where this money is being spent and couple that with secured funding on our border.
One of the issues we've been facing, of course, increasing threats of anti-Semitism and related violence, really at an alarming rate. You serve on House Intel, so you had FBI Director Chris Wray in to talk about it. Can you talk about the risks we are facing and what the committee has found to be one of the causes of this surge?
Well, first of all, we need to acknowledge the barbaric attacks on Israel on October 7th of this year. I mean, it was terrible. We need to do everything we can to dismantle and completely eliminate Hamas. And I think that's a collective view of members of the Intelligence Committee in a bipartisan way, and much of the Congress there also. it's extremely frustrating to see the anti-Semitism, particularly on our college campuses and universities. It's, in my view, just atrocious to see that happening on our college campuses. So I think you need to speak out about that and raise awareness on that. We've done that in a bipartisan way in the Congress on making sure that we stand up for Israel, which, by the way, is our #1 ally in the Middle East and the only democracy in the Middle East. And so I think that's why you saw the 2 carrier fleets move to the Middle East as part of a deterrence to make sure the aperture of the war didn't expand, particularly in northern Israel and southern Lebanon. We continue to watch that, but we have to support our ally, Israel.
Well, as you know, Hamas pulled their surprise attack on Israel because of technology that Israel apparently was not monitoring. Are we monitoring potential threats here by Hamas or other terrorist entities?
Well, from an intelligence standpoint, Paul, once this is over, I mean, Israel's still in the heart of the war now, but there is going to be a time when we're going to review what went wrong here from an intelligence standpoint. I mean, the Mossad is one of the best intelligence agencies in the world, and there were mistakes here that were done. There was a surprise that happened here that shouldn't have happened. So there will be time to review this and make sure something like this never happens again. We need to learn from this, both from an American perspective, but also from a Mossad perspective. There were mistakes made.
Yeah, President Biden, of course, met with President Xi in San Francisco. You serve on the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. You gave the president a list of demands. Well, how successful were you?
Well, we'll see. I think there's a real trust deficit when it comes to Xi Jinping and China. We are intertwined economically with China. They're our #1 trading partner. We have the 2 largest economies in the world. But when I say they've been untrustworthy, it's through the lens of the actions they've taken. Supporting Putin in Ukraine is a non-starter. The balloon flying over the U.S. and claiming that it was a meteorological balloon was wrong and deceitful. Getting to the origins of COVID and what happened, the Chinese have lied and been deceitful from that perspective. They continue to steal our intellectual property. They continue to engage in wolf warrior diplomacy against the United States. So we're looking for actions. And I should also mention fentanyl that gets produced in China, brought to the United States. So these are a list of things that Biden is going to talk with Xi Jinping about. I'm glad they're having the discussion, but we need to see action on behalf of the China. The last point that I would make, Paul, is make no mistake, China has a plan to replace the United States. And part of what we're doing on the Select Committee in a bipartisan way is raising and showing the malign activities of the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party. And then secondly, how do we win the strategic competition against China? I think you do that on the economic front, and we need to focus on trade, supply chain issues. How do we work with our like-minded allies in the Indo-Pacific region that are craving our leadership to make sure we're counteracting China?
Finally, and just briefly, Congressman, it looked like Speaker Johnson didn't really have an appetite for impeachment proceedings against President Biden, but issuing a statement very recently in which he said actually he's reviewed things and he now supports it going ahead. Is that the way? Is that what Republicans should be doing when you come back from break?
Well, we'll see. I don't serve on the Judiciary Committee. I don't serve on the Government Oversight Committee. But what I've said is, as a former federal prosecutor, that's you got to follow the facts and evidence. I know the committees are working very hard. Chairman Jordan, Chairman Comer, they've done a lot of they've issued a lot of subpoenas. They've done a lot of depositions. I think there is some disturbing facts related to Hunter Biden and what he engaged in. But again, let's see where those facts and evidence go. We should not take this lightly. But if it does lead that direction, I think Speaker Johnson will make the right decision.
Congressman Darren LaHood, so much to talk about, but out of time. I thank you for your time and wishing you a wonderful and blessed Thanksgiving holiday with your family.
Same to you, Paul. Thank you.
And still to come on